Thank you very much. She said enjoy, I didn't say enjoy. I want to manage that expectation right up front. I thought I'd just do a quick 2 minutes. I know there's a lot of words up there, a quick 2 minutes about me, so you can sort of put into context where I've been, where I've come from, where I think I'm going, and therefore what I think about what I'm going to say with collaboration and stuff. I've always, just about always in my career, represented the occupier. Although for 7-8 years of that I spent that as a consultant working for those occupiers. I started my career as an electrical engineer. Before I qualified, I realised I didn't want to be an electrical engineer, I wanted to be a surveyor. And at that time, some of you that are a little bit older than some of the others in this room will remember the Apple Macintosh computer that came out, which had a screen like a postcard. That for me is when FM was invented, because that had a little thing on it which is now called AutoCAD, but it had a little thing that you could move boxes and tables and chairs and circles around on a computer screen and do space planning, and that's what turned me on, and I got into architectural design and space planning and all that sort of stuff for a big Canadian insurance company. I left there and went to Electronic Data Systems, who's now HP, and I worked for them during the late 80s and through the 90s when they were taking over everything in this country from a government point of view. They did all of the Inland Revenue, the DVLA, and we're now in the sort of second and third generation of those contracts, those 10-year outsourced contracts. And on one particular contract, for instance, we outsourced 4,500 people into EDS from the public sector on one day. And you talk about collaboration, that was a real shock for me. And I might touch on some of those things. I then left EDS and went to work in what I thought was the best job in the world for Dell Computers during the late 90s and the early 2000s. And that was in a time when Dell Computers, the share price was going out through the roof, which is why I bought a house in the south of France, which is fantastic. But more importantly, going back to my career, the company was growing at 50 and 55% per annum. And we talk about collaboration. I said this at lunchtime to a couple of folks about location strategy. And in Dell, we were growing so fast. And the relevance of this story hopefully will link in with what I think about collaboration in a minute. But Michael Dell realised, and I'll talk about Michael Dell a couple of times, I think, if I can remember, because I have no notes. I don't even know what's behind me. He decided that location strategy and ownership of real estate and facilities and location strategy should not sit with the operations, the business people. And the for instances that pushed him over the edge were, you asked a guy in France, bearing in mind we're growing at, there's 1,000 people in the company this Christmas, by the next Christmas do, there's going to be 2,000 people. Yeah, so half the people at the Christmas do didn't work for the company last Christmas. So it's that really sort of scary sort of thing. And I was opening a call centre for 2,000 people every quarter in everywhere from South Africa to Finland to literally all over the place. So he took the relationship with the estate agents and the brokers and so on off of all the business guys. You asked a guy in Paris, where do you think the best French-speaking call centre should be? And he would say on the suburbs of Paris. If you ask somebody else who doesn't quite work in Paris, where should the best French-speaking call centre go, he will tell you, oh, it's got to be down in Marseille or Montpellier, which is actually where we put the first one, because it's a beautiful place to live and you can be on the Mediterranean, etc., etc. The real answer we discovered was not in France at all. It was actually in North Africa, in Morocco, and that was the start of Dell's globalisation. So suddenly, the real estate and facilities team are now responsible for driving low-cost location strategy. So we put things into Tunisia and into Morocco and into Bratislava and into all sorts of, you ask the same guy in Munich, where should the German call centre go? And he said, well, the cheapest place for German language is obviously Berlin. Well, it's not, it's actually in Hungary or in Slovakia, but he's not going to own that. So suddenly overnight, we found that we got a huge amount of power, is the word. But we had a huge amount of impact on the business. And that 7 or 8 years that I spent at Dell was, it was the good old days. And those of you that are in a great job, and we've heard a couple of things today, you might well be living through the good old days today, but you don't know about it for another decade or so. So if you are, really, really stop and smell the coffee, because I went to all these fantastic places, and my photograph album at home is absolutely empty of anywhere outside of Cornwall. Yeah, I didn't stop and go to those places, and I didn't participate because I'm always so busy. So if you're doing that sort of thing now, just stop and just go and take a bit of time out and go and enjoy it, because it really, they are the good old days. Yeah. When I left Dell, I went to live in my house in south of France that I just mentioned, which I called Dell. And when I came back, I didn't want to go and work for a big American corporate again, and I was fortunate enough to be part of an organisation called Cornet, which is the corporate real estate networking UK chapter of this body called Cornet, and I got to know lots of my counterparts. And while I was in France, I knew I was running out of money, knew I'd done the project, I'd refurbished an old house, knew I wanted to come back to the UK, but I didn't want to go and work for a big corporate again. So we started Corporate Property Advisors, which at the time was just 5 of us, and we were all in our 40s, all been there and done it. So there was me from Dell, the guy from Cable and Wireless, the guy from BP, the guy from BP, the guy from Reuters, the news agency that had moved out to Canary Wharf. And he didn't want to commute to Canary Wharf, so he'd organised himself a get-out-of-jail card, and we started Corporate Property Advisors. And unbeknown to us, we were a huge interest to our peer group. So suddenly we had the corporate real estate director at Microsoft and O2 and all these other companies coming to talk to us about how could you possibly leave a fantastic job like that and go and do exactly what Julie's going to do. Which is why I asked Julie, are you scared about your new job? Because we were petrified. But fear is a great motivator, and it does get you up in the morning and all that sort of good stuff. And we found that we were winning work because people were interested. We'd been there and done it as a corporate occupier, and I'll talk about that in a second. But more importantly, they thought, when I get fired from here, I could come and work with you and be one of you. So that was a good thing. And you can see I'm not going to run through them. Other than to say we did some fantastic things. I did some absolutely amazing things, and I thought, well, maybe life after Dell does exist, and maybe it is quite good. But I want to get on to the facilities bit and the main sort of crux of what I'm going to talk about, and hopefully I press. I now work for DX. I ought to just tell you 2 minutes about. I ought to just tell you 2 minutes about what I'm doing at DX. And for those of you who don't know DX, when you leave here and you drive home and you're next on the motorway, you'll see these. And you go, oh, no, I know who they are now. It used to be called the Document Exchange. So all of the land registry documents, all the documents that go through the solicitors, go through the Document Exchange. And we've acquired a logistics company, or what they call Irregular Weight and Dimension, IWD company, a logistics parcel company, because letters are in decline, because guess what, it's all gone electronic. So that's massively in decline. We've got over 4,000 facilities in the UK. I thought I knew a lot about property and square footage and all that sort of stuff, and I thought I had a big job with Dell because it had, and at EDS because we had lots and hundreds of properties. Got 4,000. A lot of them are tiny little things and mailboxes and all that sort of good stuff. But it's still a lease renewal, it's still a license renewal, it's still a transaction, and all that sort of good stuff. I'm not going to go too much into the company because we're a logistics company. I think you all kind of get that. Over 5,000 staff. We are all over the UK and Ireland. 4,000 high street exchanges. The big deal for me is that this is from a couple of different companies. So my challenge right now is trying to get location strategy, the sorts of things I've just talked about with Dell, here, and trying to close a couple of these red and a blue dot in the same location and just put one big dot. So that's what I'm spending all my time doing right now. A couple of stats on the business so that you can see the sorts of challenges that I've got, and we've talked about cost, etc., etc. And then I'm getting to the collaboration stuff in a minute. Yeah, trust me, I am. 18 billion, I don't even know how many noughts 18 billion has got on it. I know it's a lot of noughts. So it means that every sale we make is 70p. So when I was at Dell Computers, the average cost per box was about $600, 400 or 500 quid. It's 70p. So it's absolutely low cost, really fast, high volume, trying to get it out the door. And every day, and the funny thing about hearing the airplane man, is he in the room today? Is he in the room now? Good. Good, I hated him. I absolutely hated him. It's brilliant, wasn't it? I can't fly, I can't do any of that sort of stuff. And when I was running around a car park, I wanted to be a lorry driver, but I didn't tell him that this morning. It sounded a bit lame. In fact, while he was doing his thing about the red arrows, I spent the entire 45 minutes, and if the guy sat next to me wants to vouch for me. I spent 45 minutes trying to open my packet of mints. And I couldn't open them, so I had to ask the guy at the grown-up next to me to open my mints. So letters are in decline. The business is changing rapidly. You know, it's really changing. So our 4,000 units that we've got, we expect there to be 3,500 in about a year's time, because we think that this figure here is going to, you know, once people get the hang of it, and we thought this was going to happen 5-10 years ago. It's taken so long for people to change and to get the hang of. We don't need to send, because what happens now is people send an email, print it, and send the paper. It's ridiculous. So our estate is changing. So I joined DX a couple of years ago as a consultant. So I spent the last 2 years of while I was at CPA, at Corporate Property Advisors, as a consultant. And I wanted to stay with CPA and be a consultant and go and do some other stuff and look after my other clients, which puts, if you don't want something, you're in an absolutely fantastic negotiating position. Yeah, because they kept saying, well, you ought to come and do this job now that we've taken over this other company, we're going PLC, you know, we need our own real estate director. And I should have said, yes, you do, well, let me go and recruit you one, and I sail off into the sunset. But I didn't like where we were going, because we were getting, Corporate Property Advisors were getting bought by EC Harris, and I didn't want to go and work for a service provider in this industry. I'd rather stay client side. So that's what I did. So I left and now joined DX. A couple of pretty pictures. Now these are big sheds that I'm buying all over the place, you know, and I can remember spending 20, 30 years in facilities and thinking I knew everything about space planning. But if you think about it, you don't know about, you know, space planning is a two-dimensional activity. It's all about how many square feet. Yeah, this room is what, I don't know, 3,000 square feet, 2.5, 3,000 square feet. But in DX, you'd look at this and go, well, actually it's 35,000 cubic feet. Yeah, because we're in logistics, so it's three-dimensional, yeah? So you don't just walk into a room and do this anymore. You walk into a room now and go, I could get that in there and that in there and that sort of stuff. So it's a completely different view on space and space management and space utilisation. I've talked about most of those things. Let me just make sure I've not done anything there. I am genuinely getting to the collaboration bit, right? You know, culture starts with a C, so does collaboration. So let me move on quickly with that slightly tenuous link. I want to talk about the FM industry, and this is my take on it. And just a quick aside, I hadn't realised until today, I'm also a fellow of the British Institute of Facilities Management. I'm one of about 105. We're a very rare breed, aren't we? And we need to do more about that. You either need to shoot us all and say, let's not have fellows. Yeah. But Julie won the, in fact, there's a couple of you in this room that have entered Facilities Manager of the Year awards and things. And I was the lead judge. I think you was, yeah. I was the lead judge when Julie was awarded the Facilities Manager of the Year award. So I felt particularly proud this morning when Julie stood up as the head of the Institute. And I would like to think I had a little tiny piece to play in that role. And the fact that Julie's now going to do what I've just done, I'm sure we can sit and talk all day long, which you'll be pleased to know I won't. So in the 1980s, and remember this is according to me, and at that time I worked for the big insurance company in America, in Canada, and technology was just, you know, there was no IT departments. There were these great big boxes started to arrive that nobody could lift, and they had a little screen on them about that big. And I think the facilities management, and I think there was the AFM was probably the only official body around that time. It was inventing itself. Yeah? And I can remember, and I've got some bad feelings about the way that the industry has sort of evolved. But in the 90s, we spent the entire time trying to define it and write down actually what is facilities. How is it? Why is it not property? Why is it not maintenance? Why is it not facilities? Premises. And I can remember in the 80s, I was called the premises manager. You know, I thought facilities were toilets, as I still do. So we spent the 90s trying to define it and argue amongst ourselves as to what it was and what it meant. And every time you went to a conference, it was something else. And you know, there was a group of people here that thought it was that thing. There was another group of people here that thought it was that. And all the time, everybody else outside of the facilities profession didn't want to know. You know, so the property people, it's beneath us. It genuinely is beneath us. It is toilets and corridors and all that sort of stuff, don't want to know. And then we hit a recession, and suddenly all the fees and all of the space take-up ended and stopped. And suddenly the big, and I know I'm at risk of offending some people, But the CBREs and the JLLs and so on suddenly got an interest in facilities management. And actually there's a revenue stream here that we can latch into. Let's have a facilities team. Let's be a facilities company. And suddenly there was interest. And then we got out of that recession and the interest waned a bit as the fees started to take over. And the agency community got more and more into fees and didn't need to bother with toilets and space planning and all that other stuff. We'll just do the landlordy type stuff. But I can remember, in the 90s, one of our ridiculous sales slogans towards the end of the 90s was, "Stick with me and we'll save you from the millennium bug." Yeah, it was the facilities team that were going to get us out of the millennium bug hoo-ha. And of course, come January the 4th or 5th, and everybody realised that nobody had actually died, we blamed IT. I told those IT guys don't know what they're talking about. It's an absolute waste of time. All that money and effort we've spent. We even bought Millennium Gnomes and had them all around the office in Dell. When I was at Dell, we bought these little China gnomes. I still got 2 in my garden under a bush because they have really shit, crap quality and they crack in the frost if you let the frost get them. But we ran out and bought a couple of dozen of these little Millennium Gnomes and gave them around the place. And of course, now we're into and I'm afraid I don't know what this decade is called. I know that's the 80s, 90s, the noughties. What's this decade? No, okay. So clearly not important. But we are now into our second generation, and I look around this room and I see lots of young faces. Even my kids, one of them, it works in the property industry. So I think that, in my lifetime, there's a second generation of facilities managers that are coming through. And certainly when you're in facilities back here, you tended to either get thrown into it or you levitated into it. It was the only thing left for you to go and do. It wasn't a career of choice, shall we say, like it is now. And I hope there are people that are leaving school and college and uni that are taking up some of the fantastic things that are going on in the profession. And that's credit to lots of people that have worked for a long time in that profession, for which I take absolutely no praise whatsoever. So there generally are, in 2010, there's lots of opportunities for people as a proper profession on its own. I am getting to the big crux. Even now, in 2015, there are lots of courses available and lots of conversation and lots of dialogue around how do we elevate facilities. And this is the main bit of what I want to get to. How do we get facilities up the influence ladder in a corporate world? How do we have more say? How do we get to the boardroom? And I don't know how many of you are actually in-house facilities people, but it'd be interesting to know how many of you report into a board or to the property director, the IT director, the HR director, the finance director. In very few companies is there a facilities director reporting into the board, sort of thing, in my experience. I think property is a custodian of a lot of facilities functions, but in the hierarchy of things, facilities seems to, for whatever reason, come underneath property. I'm not saying that's right. I generally I'm not passing a comment on that. But there's almost a whole industry teaching us how to do this stuff. Yeah, so can we actually get teams to add value? Can we promote FM within the company? And my answer, quite frankly, is no. No, we can't. Not on our own. So guess what the answer is? We need to collaborate. Yeah. So what do we need to do? We need to do it differently. And we've heard some, the stuff that we heard from Paul earlier. Is Paul in the room? I really hated him. No, I'm joking. That was collaboration by numbers for me. And I'd say that if he was in the room. It was very scientific. It's not what I'm about. I totally understand in those environments and in those companies, it needs to underpin everything that they do contractually. I totally get that. And it's a good job we're not all like me. But it's a good job that we've got people like Paul that are keeping the straight and narrow, quite frankly. But I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about collaboration. Yeah, now you mention it, yeah, collaboration. And I think, and I said this just now, when I was being asked what can they say to introduce me, that I actually think it's incumbent on facilities people to be more than just facilities people. I think of all, if you look at every organisation, the operations, whether it's making computers or forklift trucks or train stations or whatever it might be, you've got the operations and manufacturing, the people that are actually doing the stuff that's getting out the door. And then you've got the sales and all the corporate overheads, and it tends to be facilities will report into those people. And what I think I'm advocating is, and I've done it all the way through my career, is collaboration is something that you just automatically do. You shouldn't even have to think about it. It should just be there. And we've heard some great tips and things today about the things that we need to do. And I always find, and exactly with Julie, and we used to sit and talk about what's going to make the great facilities managers. And for me, it's not the ones that can let the best contract, the best cleaning contract, the best maintenance contract, the best landscape gardening. Because 9 times out of 10, your customers don't give a shoot about those things. They genuinely do not care. The thing that I think is really, really important is knowing and understanding, and there are a couple of people I could quote, and Julie, and I'm not saying it because she's the nearest one to me, but she is definitely one of those people that totally understands the importance of facilities within that organisation and how it can impact on a day-to-day and on a strategic level the operation, the success of that operation. And somebody asked a question this morning, I forgot what it was. That's a shame. It was a really good question. And if it comes back to me, if it comes back to me, I will bring it up in a minute. So I think as facilities managers, we need to absolutely know and understand about the organisation that we're in. Because, if you move from job to job, you'll find that you've got a honeymoon period when you move to a new job. And that honeymoon period is not you working out how facilities work, and all. That's a given, you know all of that. That's what you get paid for. It's finding out how and what's important within that company. What are the really important things? Now, I've got a couple of examples. And it seems like I'm focusing on somebody who used to work for you, then worked for me, I'll tell you later, so I'm not going public on it. I worked for a television company moving all of the BBC and ITV and stuff up to Salford Quays. But absolutely amazing project to get involved with, worked for about 3 or 4 years on that. I recruited an FM whilst that television company was still in London. And she, giving things away now, he was a really good facilities manager. He was a really good facilities man, knew exactly what he was doing, but on one particular day, the power went off. Right? And when the power goes off in a television company, you potentially go off air, and you don't go off air in a television. You can't put a sign up saying, temporarily out of order, please choose another channel. It just doesn't happen. And when I phoned when I phoned this person, and said, and I don't get overexcited terribly much. When I said, what are you doing about it? She said, not to worry. I've put an all-staff notice out saying the maintenance man's on his way, power will be restored. Now, hang on a minute. We are broadcasting live pictures at the time around the globe into betting shops, this particular part of the company. It did all of the live racing pictures into all the betting shops around the country. And the bit that had gone off was the bit that goes across the bottom of the page that tells you what the odds are. So you can place your bets and all that sort of stuff. And it was the facility down in Slough that actually generates. And these are guys that are sitting there on walkie-talkies and all this sort of stuff talking to the betting office. And this had gone off. So they just put out an all-staff email to all the betting shops saying, hold your bets, don't worry, the 4:45 is still going to go off at 4:45, but you can't bet on it because the maintenance man's on his way. So that person clearly did not understand the implications of that type of, that was absolute suicide, sending out a note like that. And as we go through, she would not have done that had she have fully understood the business that company we're in and the importance of what's important, what's not important. So whenever you move jobs and you get this honeymoon period, it's not about you finding out how facilities work and the contracts work, which are all important, but you should know all of that anyway. It's knowing about the company and always looking for a way to add value. I've been lucky enough and unlucky enough to work in companies that have been subject to mergers and acquisitions. 15, 20, what does that mean? Is that 15 minutes, 20 seconds? Oh, right. Yeah. 5 minutes, right, 5 minutes, okay. I'm going to keep looking at that now. Where was I? What was I saying? What? Yeah, mergers and acquisitions. Nowhere nowhere is collaboration more important than in a merger and acquisition. And those of you that have been through them, either been taken over or you've taken over somebody, will know and be able to relate to exactly what I'm about to say. In a company that is going to take over another company, the company you take over, whether you've taken them over or they've taken you over, are them. Yeah? And they're different to us because we're the main company. And I've done this 3 or 4 times, so I know exactly what I'm, in my instance, it's exactly what I'm talking about. You don't come together and start properly collaborating until you take over somebody else. And then suddenly you become us and they become them. Yeah? So all these walls that you were building with these guys and the protectionism about my job and my office and where am I going to... And I remember I worked for a company, one of the companies on the previous slide, where we were taken over. And on the day we were taken over, I had to go to my office in Milton Keynes. I went to my office in Milton Keynes, and there was a strange guy sat at my desk with his feet on my table, on my desk. And he was telling me he was a new boss. Now, within 6 months, he actually ended up working for me, and we are the best of friends now, this person and I. We are really... She's tweeting people, telling people what I'm... She's not even listening.
I'm not now.
Oh, right, okay. I don't get tweeting. They are tweeting what I'm saying and missing what I'm saying.
I'm tweeting what I'm hoping you're going to be saying.
Right. Oh, about collaboration. Let's hope it's about collaboration. So, a merger and an acquisition is a fantastic learning curve to go on to teach you all about collaboration. And talk about, the things that we've heard today with the red arrows and Paul just now. It's about that common goal. And when you take over another company, particularly the first time we did it, it was a hostile bid, and they had spent 6 months fighting us off, saying what a bunch of sharks we were, don't go near them and all that sort of stuff. When it actually happens, it's Dracula sort of season. And it was only then when we took over another company that all the people that we'd spent that last year with come together as, oh, now how are we going to deal with this? Yeah, and that nothing has changed. It's still the same offices, the same people. It's just the circumstances have changed. I think we need, as a facilities organisation, you think about people that do not make it through those mergers and acquisitions. They tend to be the awkward ones. Generally, and I can say this as an old guy, they tend to be the older people. You go on, and I know I'm getting ages now, but I'm going ages at myself. You go to, and I've been on so many training and development courses, and there's always the old guy who just doesn't get it and doesn't want to play, and he sits there like this. He does all the body language stuff that we heard this morning. Yeah, and now I'm an old git. I can relate to that. I did this 20 years ago. What am I sitting here like this for? I get it. Yeah, and it's those guys that don't make it and don't make the cut and don't see through that next merger and acquisition. So if you're going to really influence in facilities, you've really got to look for opportunities to collaborate. And facilities, it's facilitate. Nobody else in the organisation is as common a denominator, very common in most of our cases I know, but a common denominator with all of the other departments. Facilities touches everybody. Yeah, and we're one of the very few... I go to our company conference, which is called the T180, because it's the top 180 people, and I'm the only one who knows everybody in the room. Yeah, because I go to all the sites, I'm the only one who does all that sort of stuff. So we really are in a very fortunate position to constantly try and seek opportunities to collaborate. Don't bore them to death with stats about your maintenance contract. They're not the slightest bit interested. It's really not interesting. And I've had a couple of conversations out there, which are sort of half interesting, but they're not the sort of thing that I would take back and talk to my... that I would take back to my CFO and go, oh, it's great, yeah, I talked about this guy who's going to do landscaping this, and he's got some fantastic spreadsheets for doing... He just completely glazed over. Yeah, he's not interested. That's my job. That's what we do. So please don't take every opportunity. You've got one quick story. Michael Dell used to go around the world visiting all these different countries, and everybody would take the opportunity to preach to him about how good we are at our job. And he tasked a whole load of people to come up with a presentation technique that meant... Am I being timed out? Yeah. He came up with... yeah, a big hook, sorry. He tasked his management team with coming up with a way of being presented at that got the answer on the first slide. So the answer, and it was called Answer First. I don't know how long it took to think that one up, but it was called Answer First. And the first slide you put up had what your recommendation would be. Yeah, we want to open a new facility in Lisbon because, and it's got all the stats and data, like a dashboard, all that management information on the first slide. And if he didn't believe you or he wanted some more information, you go to slide 2 or slide 3 or slide 4. But the way that we used to do it in Dell was well, I've got 15 minutes, I'm going to have 15 slides, and I'm going to take all 15 slides to tell you what a great job I'm doing, and I'm going to introduce Steve and the rest of the he didn't give a shoot. He just wanted to get straight out, get on the plane and go somewhere else. So the answer first thing, when you're talking to people who are not facilities, they are not interested. Yeah, do not try and bore them. And we heard Mark this morning talk about, I would have given him a right thick here if he took 2 weeks doing a presentation. Come and tell me about, facilities, not interested. I want to know about, the more strategic stuff. So always seek opportunities to be more strategic and more collaborative in everything you do. And there's always an opportunity, there's always an angle for you to not get detailed and get in the facilities bit. I'm going to quickly go through this. I'm sorry about the animation. I don't know how to turn it off. I've got no idea how to turn it off. If you're in facilities, then these are important messages for you. If you're in service provision of those facilities, then these are as important to you. And we heard about these with Paul and with Julie and earlier on this morning about understand what the customer's doing to try and find an important angle, etc. I'm very conscious that there's a big fella there waiting to pull me off the stage. So I'm not going to go through those really. The priorities in facilities, it's really easy to do the easy stuff because it's quick and you can make a difference today, but that's not what the priorities are. The priorities really, if you're getting yourself further and further up the chain, are the things that are really important, and you need to devote some time every day to doing those things that are important and not just the things that are urgent, because it's really easy in facilities to sort of fall back to operational, it's urgent, we must stop this, do that, so on and so on and so on. The F word, try not to use the F word in this particular context is fees. The finance director, everybody else, if you're a service provider, do not have a word in there. Do not use the F word. It's don't use it. Right, my best tip to finish. Right, don't just be a facilities manager. Use all the things that you've heard and looked at and thought about today, because if you're just a facilities manager, you'll only ever be just a facilities manager.